What is going on, guys? Ryan Nelson here. And you know what? I missed you. I really did. It's been a long time since I've seen you. And I'm really sad about that. But you know what? I'm back. I got some videos in the pipeline. We're gonna be cranking them out here soon. So don't worry, I'm back. We can hang out again. But today, finally, I'm gonna be talking about this beast of a camera called the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. And answering your question. I'm saying one question because I really got one question about it. I did get a few, but only one I could really answer. Can you say that in one breath 6 times? 6 Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, but it's almost a tongue twister. Almost. Anyway, let's get to talking about this camera and show you some examples. See if it's for you. It was for me. I ended up just buying it. It's mine. It's my baby now. It's my baby now. I'm gonna keep it and swing with it, dance with it. It's been a while since I've been here. None of that. All right, so the first question that I had about this camera was some rumored overheating. I did the best thing I could think of. This was a few months ago. Like I said, it's been a while since I've been here. So I took this camera out a few months ago. Well, it's still pretty warm here. Just to see what happened. Let's go see. So what better place to test out the overheating in this camera than the middle of the desert? Got cactus, we got sun, no clouds, nothing. So one thing I have noticed when using this camera, hand holding it, I do feel a fair amount of heat coming off of this thing. You know, I've noticed one of my catchphrases, if you're ever out with me doing a job, is I clearly brought the wrong shoes for this. It happens a lot. So I'm gonna let this sit out here and just run for a little while and see if it's gonna overheat. The camera itself is sitting in the sun, and I don't even know if I'm still recording. I see that red light. That red light's still going. It hasn't overheated yet, so we're good. Let's see how long this takes. I've had this camera sitting out here for the better part of half an hour now, in the sun, recording 6K RAW to an external hard drive. Maybe that has something to do with it. When you put a card in, you're recording internally, maybe it overheats faster. I don't know. But I'm gonna say as of now, I personally have not had any overheating problems with this camera. Maybe it's because there's a light breeze out here and it just keeps that airflow. Perhaps if you're in studio with zero airflow, it overheats a lot faster. Who knows? I would have thought that the sun beating down on this camera body would make it overheat, because everything overheats out here at some point. One thing that I am kind of sad this camera doesn't have, and I get it, it's a small camera. It's not meant to be super like professional. My Sony FS5 has built-in ND filters, which is really, really nice. I don't have to stick ND filters on the front of my lenses all the time. This camera does not have built-in ND filters. Not the biggest deal, but I do really enjoy having the built-in ND filters in my Sony. Not a deal breaker for me, especially for the quality. So far, the quality I'm getting out of this camera, I'm super impressed with. I've been like, this is the camera I have always wanted. Like the quality out of this, I'm pretty stoked on it. It's 10:45. It's getting kind of warm. Midday. You don't really want to shoot in this, do you? I don't either. I wish we had some clouds today, but we don't. I think this camera's handling pretty darn well in midday shooting, but I want to take it to a different extreme. Let's go see what it can do in some low light. One more thing before we go. I wanted to note the screen on the back of this. I really like it. I do. It's a big screen. It's beautiful. It's nice to look at. Still hard to see in the middle of the day. I feel like my Atomos, I can still see it in the middle of the day. This thing, it's 100% turned all the way up. Still hard to see. Just saying. All right, so now to the exact opposite extreme, low light, and I'm intentionally underexposing this image. So I'm at f9.1 right now, but I mean, there's still a fair amount of light. We've got lights strung about, we've got lights from the parking garage, but dark night sky. So we're gonna see how much noise I get out of this image that is intentionally underexposed shooting 6K RAW. You're already seeing this. I don't know what this looks like yet, but you already know because you're watching it. I don't know. So, is it good? Is it good? I think it's good. It's not that good. It's not horrible, but it's not that good. Luckily, I did do some proper exposures out there. So taking a look at these with proper exposures, this is this really solid image. I'm seeing almost zero noise in here. It's super crisp, super clear, and like highly impressed. And I find it really hard to get this good of a result with my Sony camera. But this one, it's just there. It's good, it's solid. I like the exposure. But now that we've seen a nighttime underexposed image, how about a midday overexposed image? So I went out and shot these examples. One shot at f/22 and the other one's shot at f/5.6. Big difference in exposure here. I wasn't quite able to bring down the hottest highlights. You can still tell it was very overexposed, but it was also a very overexposed shot to begin with. I think with this raw footage, you do have a couple of stops either way to play with. Just don't blow it to the extreme, because you do notice that. So when you first get this camera and start setting it up, one of the big things in the setup is, do I want to shoot ProRes or do I want to shoot RAW? If you want to shoot 6K, your only option is RAW. If you want to shoot 4K, your only option is ProRes. What's the difference in the two? Well, you're going to have more flexibility when you're shooting RAW. That being said, the file sizes are going to be a lot bigger and a lot harder to work with. If you're shooting ProRes, you're gonna be able to import that footage right into DaVinci, Premiere Pro, Final Cut, whatever editing software you're working with, you can import ProRes right to it. But if you are shooting RAW, you're gonna have to import that footage into DaVinci, process it, and then export that into Premiere Pro or Final Cut, or do your editing in DaVinci. I don't know how to edit in there quite so well, quite yet. Learning it, getting the hang of it. But from where I personally stand right now, I do all my editing in Premiere Pro. So once we break that down a little bit farther, in the ProRes and RAW categories, you have different subcategories in there. You've got your bit rates, 3:1, 5:1, 12:1, while you're shooting RAW. And then with ProRes, you have ProRes HQ, 422, LT, and Proxy. What's the difference in these? Well, the data you're collecting in all of these. If you're shooting RAW, the 3:1 is gonna be the best you're gonna be able to get out of this camera. 12:1, file sizes are a little bit smaller, but you're losing out a tiny bit of data there as well. And then same with the ProRes. If you're shooting HQ, you're shooting your highest quality ProRes. Shooting Proxy, you're shooting a very small file size in ProRes. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of data there. There's still plenty to work with, but it's all depending on what your final product is and how concerned you are about quality. Now, I'm not sure how these differences are gonna transfer onto YouTube. May not see much difference at all. There is a little bit of color difference between the ProRes and the RAW footage, and that's probably just me not being awesome at color grading. The big difference you notice right away shooting these two is the color difference and then the clarity difference. The RAW footage almost looks a little bit soft at first, but that's just because there's so much detail there and your variations between highlights and shadows and your harsh lines. There's just a lot more detail there to give very subtle tones. So almost at first it looks softer, but it's a lot sharper. There's a lot more detail there. It just gives you that much more to work with. So one really good reason to shoot ProRes on this camera is speed of editing. You're not gonna have to process RAW files. You do still have to do some color grading because either way you shoot RAW or ProRes, you're getting a flat profile out of this camera. But it does save a little bit of time in post-production and hard drive space. And then the benefit of shooting the RAW out of this camera is you're gonna get the highest possible quality you can out of this camera for your production. There's benefits and cons to each one. It really depends on what your project is and what you're looking for and how fast you need to get that project done. One cool feature that I found in this camera is the time-lapse feature. Really easy, it just creates a time-lapse straight into a video. So it takes the time-lapse, wraps it up into a nice little video file, and then you just deal with it the same way you would deal with your video clips. No importing from Photoshop, importing single photos here. It just makes the time-lapse way easier. And it's really easy to set up, so I like it. So when you first get this camera and you're looking at the outside and all the little buttons, there's not that many buttons. If you put this next to my Sony, this has like 2 buttons. My Sony has a billion, too many buttons. But anyway, one of the buttons has a little camera on it. It actually takes stills as well, raw stills. So I did a couple of stills while I was out testing this camera as well. You know what? It takes a pretty decent still. I'm not gonna take it out on a still shoot because it's not really quick. It's not like using a Canon or a Sony camera where you just hold the button down and you get the rapid fire. It's actually kind of really slow and laggy in taking a photo, but it's a nice feature to have in this camera if you just need to take a still now and again or for shooting thumbnails. And the raw files that come off this thing are actually pretty good. I've compared a couple against my EOS R, and then I was actually able to match pretty close my EOS R on a studio shot. So you're getting a pretty good, nice raw image off this camera. It's just not very functional. Not really saying that right. It's functional, it's not a stills camera. That's all I'm saying. But it does take a still here and there. Now, as somebody with a photography background, I'm used to dealing in shutter speeds, not necessarily shutter angles. And one of the options in here is set it to shutter angle or shutter speed, and I've been testing out shutter angle. The reason I've been doing that is when I switch frame rates, I don't have to also go and switch my shutter speed. If I have it set to 180 degree shutter angle, it's automatically set to 180 degrees from wherever my frame rate is set. And it just makes things easier. So I've been testing out shutter angle on here, liking it, just makes things a little bit easier. As far as adjustments, getting through the menus on this camera, I found it to be really easy, pretty convenient, pretty self-explanatory, like setting up the time lapse, getting your audio levels adjusted separately. There's actually 2 audio inputs on this camera, which is pretty nice. So you can have a separate input, a mini XLR, and then you have an 1/8 inch input as well. And they are separately recorded, separately adjustable. Can't complain about that. It's just a really well laid out menu. I do like it. It's so much simpler than, say, my Sony. This camera does have an HDMI output, but it does only output 1080, which is great for monitoring, not so much if you want to use an external recorder. So this camera kind of has autofocus built into it. There's a button on the back to hit it, it will focus, but it won't track focus. So you can set your focus point. If you want to track focus, you're gonna need some sort of follow focus system. I am testing out a follow focus system pretty soon, so keep an eye out for that. I'll let you know how well it works and if I like it, if I recommend it. Another thing I've noticed shooting with this camera is it does have a really, really bad rolling shutter. Just be aware of that. Bad rolling shutter. Here's an example. See, pretty bad. And something I've noticed using this camera, it is kind of annoying. If I change quality settings or turn the camera off and turn it back on and try to go back and preview files that I've shot earlier in that day, they don't load, they don't come up. They don't come up if I've turned the camera on and off. They don't come up if I've changed the quality. And that's actually kind of obnoxious. I don't know why it bugs me so much, but it does. I just kind of want to see what's on the hard drive and what I've shot in the past. But if I can't pull it up, then I need to go get my computer, put the hard drive in my computer, test it. I don't know if this is a bug with my camera or a very common theme with the Blackmagics, or there's a specific reason that it doesn't do that. Just something to be aware of. I've found that out shooting one day that I couldn't pull up the files that I just shot. It actually had me kind of worried that I'd lost the files. They were there when I got home. I could tell from the numbering system that they were there. But, you know, it's a little unnerving when you can't pull them up right there in front of you. But you know they're there. Just another thing to be aware of. Another comment I have about this camera, it chews through batteries. I think I mentioned that in my last video. But I have found that if you're using a gold mount or a V mount battery, even the smaller ones, you can run this camera for hours on that battery and it still powers it. I've had some really good luck with the external batteries running this camera for a long time. So if you're gonna be out in the field using this without power, you don't wanna lug a bunch of tiny batteries around, look into some gold mount batteries, V mount batteries. So look into that if that's an option you're looking for. So overall, I found this camera actually to be really highly impressive, especially for the price point. It is lacking some features that I wish it had. It does have its quirks, it's a little weird here and there, but overall, I think it's a really solid camera. I'm looking forward to shooting more projects on this camera. And did I mention buying more hard drives to store all that footage? I think I mentioned that in my last video about this camera, but just a warning, buy hard drives or get ready to start deleting data. So if you guys want to check out this camera, if you want to rent it, if you want to buy it, either way, I'll drop links down below in the description so you can check it out. Rent one for a week, rent one for 3 days. See what you think. Well, that's it. That's what I got for you guys today. Thanks for hanging out. If you like this video, do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button down there, hit that subscribe button down there if you want to see more. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you guys next time.